For 6 months, a man had been watching my sister Josie from a car with a cracked taillight. On the 7th month, I wore her coat for one closing shift at the diner, and he finally moved on the wrong sister. She never wanted to make it a big deal. That was always the problem with Josie. She'd rather carry something alone than watch someone else struggle to carry it with her, and I understood that better than anyone, because I'd been carrying things for both of us since I was 14 years old. Our mother died when I was 14 and Josie was 11. Black ice, a guardrail, a Tuesday morning that started like every other Tuesday morning. She left behind a mortgage, 2 daughters, and one red wool coat that smelled like her for the first year, and then quietly stopped. And somehow that second loss hurt worse than the first. Josie and I started trading the coat back and forth after that without ever discussing why. Whoever needed to feel like she still had a hand on their shoulder that week got to wear it. It was small and dumb and sacred, and it belonged only to us. I didn't know yet that it was about to belong to someone else's obsession too. To a man watching from far enough away in bad light, a red coat wasn't a memory of a dead mother anymore. It was a signal. It meant her. Josie noticed him in March, a sedan with a taillight cracked into the shape of a spiderweb, parked across from her building for hours at a stretch. Flowers on her doormat with no card, twice in 1 week. Comments on things she'd posted online, worded just a little too specifically. What she'd worn on a Tuesday, which coffee shop, like he was checking in rather than complimenting. She went to the police twice that first month. Both times an officer named Boyd told her there was no crime yet, nothing on paper, keep a log and call if anything physical happened. For 6 months after that, I picked her up after every closing shift at Ruth's diner. 6 months of walking her from the back door to her car with my keys wedged between my knuckles, because that was the only thing I knew how to do with the fear that showed up in my chest every time she worked a night alone. I didn't know that soon walking beside her wouldn't be enough, I'd have to become her. The note came in April, tucked under her windshield wiper like a parking ticket. 4 words printed small and neat. You look tired today. Josie called me before she'd even unlocked her car door, her voice doing the thin, careful thing it did when she was trying not to scare me. I drove her to the station myself. Boyd read the note twice, turned it over like there might be something written on the back, and slid it into a folder that already looked too thin for 6 months of evidence. There's no law against looking, Miss Calloway, he said. Not unless he touches her. I remember thinking that sentence should not have been legal to say out loud to a 26-year-old woman who hadn't slept properly in a month. That night, Josie asked if she could sleep on my couch. 26 years old, asking permission to be scared. I said of course, obviously, always, and I lay awake listening to her breathe through the wall the way I used to when we were kids, and the house still smelled like our mother. 3 weeks later, someone moved into the apartment across the hall from mine. I noticed him the way you notice anyone new in a building where nothing ever changes. A man in his 30s, quiet in a way that felt deliberate rather than shy. He kept strange hours. His car, a gray sedan so unremarkable it seemed chosen for that exact quality, was always parked nose out in the same spot, like he wanted to be able to leave fast. One night, unable to sleep, I saw him standing at his window with the blinds tilted just enough to watch the parking lot below. Not on his phone. Not doing anything except watching, still as a photograph, for almost 20 minutes. We met properly 2 days later in the hallway, both of us juggling grocery bags and keys. His name was Wes. He had a dry, unhurried way of talking, like he'd already thought through every version of the conversation before it started. You're the one who watches the lot at 2 in the morning, I said, more accusation than introduction. Every night this week, he said, not even blinking, very committed to my routine. I couldn't tell if he was joking. His door was open a crack behind him, and through the gap I caught a corkboard, a photograph of a young woman I didn't recognize, a scrap of paper with a case number written in block letters. He saw me see it and closed the door another few inches, unhurried, like it cost him nothing. I didn't know her name yet, I wouldn't for months. A week after that, I cornered him by the mailboxes, tired of being the only one uneasy. Are you dangerous? I asked him flatly. I'd rather know now. He considered the question like it deserved an honest answer, which somehow unsettled me more than a denial would have. Not to you, he said. If you were ever actually in trouble, I'd already be there before you finished calling for help. I told myself that was a strange thing to say to a stranger. I didn't tell myself it made me feel for the first time in months, like maybe I wasn't the only person paying attention. A few days after that, he knocked on my door holding 2 coffees, insisting he'd bought an extra by mistake, though the coffee shop 2 blocks over wasn't the kind of place anyone found by accident. We ended up sitting on my fire escape for an hour, not talking about Josie at all. Favorite bad movies. The worst apartment either of us had ever lived in. Why he'd never once in his life learned how to swim. He was easy to talk to in a way that made me suspicious of myself. I'd spent 6 months being the only person standing between my sister and a stranger's obsession, and somewhere in that hour on the fire escape, I forgot, for the length of one bad joke, to be afraid of anything. Before he left, he paused in my doorway like he wanted to say something else and thought better of it. "Lock this behind me," he said instead. "Both locks, I'll wait to hear it." I did. I stood there afterward with my hand still on the deadbolt, listening to his footsteps cross the hall, and told myself it didn't mean anything that I liked being told to be careful by someone who seemed to actually mean it. Some nights, in spite of everything, Josie and I still laughed. She showed up at my place with a bag of groceries and our mother's stubbornness in her jaw, and we made the pasta with too much garlic, the recipe neither of us had ever written down, because we'd assumed we'd always just remember it. She held up a wooden spoon like a sword. "If he ever actually tries something," she said, "I'm hitting him with a full tray of extra crispy bacon, point blank range, no survivors." I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the kitchen floor. For about 4 minutes we were just sisters again, not a case file, not a log of license plates. That's the thing nobody tells you about fear like this. It doesn't erase the rest of your life, it just moves in next door and waits. Around that same time a man started coming into Ruth's Diner 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. Derek Holt, according to the card he finally paid with, polite, a generous tipper. The kind of regular who remembered your name, your order, small details you'd mentioned once in passing and never expected anyone to hold on to. He remembered too much, actually. He asked Josie once, lightly, whether she still lived in the same building. She hadn't told him where she lived. She was sure of that. We went over the conversation a dozen times looking for the version where she'd let it slip, and there wasn't one. "You work too hard, you know that?" he told her once, refilling his own coffee before she could get to it. "Somebody should be taking care of you." It sounded like kindness. It sat in my stomach like a stone. We noticed eventually that his tips spiked every time Josie filed a new report, almost like he knew. Then, in August, Josie called me at midnight, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone had been inside her apartment. Nothing was broken, nothing was even obviously missing. But her closet had been rearranged, coats and jackets pushed to one side like someone had been looking for something specific, and the photograph of our mother that always sat on her nightstand was turned to face the wall instead of the room. I drove over in my pajamas and we went through the apartment together, room by room, adrenaline making every ordinary shadow look wrong. The deadbolt was untouched. The window latches were untouched. There was no sign of forced entry anywhere, which somehow made it so much worse, because it meant he'd either gotten a key made from something he'd seen, or he was simply that careful. Boyd walked the apartment in under 4 minutes and told us that without any sign of forced entry there wasn't much to file. Josie asked him very quietly what exactly it would take for someone to believe her. He didn't have an answer. Neither did I, not then. That was the week Josie started keeping a bag packed by her door. Not to leave, just in case she needed to leave fast. By September, Josie had started seeing someone. Marcus from her building's gym, easy laugh, no idea what her life had become. She let herself be hopeful about him in a small, careful way, the way you test ice before you trust it. He stopped texting her back a week later. When she finally asked him why, he was awkward and evasive until she pushed, and then he admitted someone had messaged him from a number he didn't recognize, warning him to stay away from her. Said it wasn't a threat exactly, just unsettling enough that he didn't want to get involved in whatever it was. Josie didn't cry about it in front of me. She just sat very still at my kitchen table and said quietly, "He's not just watching me, he's making sure nobody else gets close enough to help." That was the moment I understood we weren't dealing with a man who wanted her attention. We were dealing with a man clearing a path. What Josie didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I'd been driving 40 minutes across town twice a week for 4 months, to a strip mall gym that smelled like rubber mats and other people's fear, learning how to get a stranger's hands off my body. I told Josie the bruise on my forearm was from moving a bookshelf. I told her the gym bag was for cardio. I didn't examine too closely why I'd started 4 months earlier, learning how to break a wrist grip and drive an elbow into a throat. I only knew that watching her flinch at car doors had done something to me that I needed somewhere to put. By October, Josie was running on fumes. She hadn't slept a full night in weeks. Marcus had resurfaced, cautiously asking if she wanted to try again now that some time had passed, and she had a second date with him on a Friday. The kind of ordinary, hopeful thing she hadn't let herself want in months. She almost canceled 3 times that week. I watched her sit at my kitchen table with her phone in her hand, thumb hovering over Marcus's name, wearing the exact expression our mother used to get right before she talked herself out of something she wanted. "You're allowed to want something that isn't about him," I told her. "One night. That's all I'm asking you to let yourself have. And if something happens while I'm gone," she said, "then it happens to me instead, because I'll be the one covering your shift, and nothing is going to happen, because nothing ever happens on a Friday close. It's the safest shift of the week." I believed that when I said it. I want that on the record. I actually believed it. "I'll cover your close," I told her. "Go. Have one night where you're not thinking about any of this." She hugged me in the doorway, grabbed her keys, then paused and pulled our mother's coat off the hook by the door. "Wear this," she said. "It's freezing and it's good luck, it always has been." I put it on without thinking twice. I clocked in at Ruth's Diner at 4 that afternoon in my sister's coat and clocked out at 11, buttoned to the throat against the cold, my keys wedged between my knuckles out of 6 months of habit. I walked toward the back lot the exact way Josie walked it every single night. The lot was emptier than usual. Our car sat under the one working light, 20 yards off, farther than it should have felt. Somewhere behind me a dumpster lid clanged shut in the wind, and I told myself that was all it was. The wind. Someone had been sitting in a car in that lot for over an hour, watching a woman in a red coat lock the diner's back door the way she always did. He wasn't watching me, he didn't know that yet. I heard him before I felt him. A shoe scraping gravel, half a second too late for me to turn around in time. A hand closed over my mouth, an arm locked around my ribs and yanked me backward off balance into the gap between 2 parked cars where the streetlight didn't reach. 4 months of Tuesday and Thursday nights took over before my brain caught up with what was happening. I drove my elbow back into something solid. I heard him grunt. I stamped down hard, twisted my wrist against his grip the way I'd practiced 100 times on a padded partner who was never actually trying to hurt me. This time someone was. He was bigger than me and ready for me to fight, which meant the training bought me seconds, not victory. He slammed me against the side of a car hard enough that its alarm shrieked to life, and in the half second his hand loosened, I got enough air to scream. "You didn't return my calls," he said, close to my ear, low and almost gentle, like he was the one being wronged. "That wasn't very nice, Josie." The sound of her name in his mouth did something the fear hadn't managed yet. It made me furious. I don't know if it was the alarm or the scream or the headlights of a passing car finally catching his face, but I felt him go still for 1 full second. His hand slid to my jaw, tilting it toward the light, and I heard him say, not to me, more to himself, "You're not." A shape came out of the dark at a dead run, shouting words I couldn't make sense of yet. He let go of me and ran. I don't remember falling. I remember the asphalt under my palms, the taste of copper, my mother's coat torn open at the shoulder seam, and a man kneeling in front of me that I'd accused, 2 months earlier, of being the dangerous one. "Don't move," Wes said. "I've got you. You're safe. He's gone." I believed the first 2 things. I wasn't sure yet about the third. The hospital gave me 6 stitches above my eyebrow and a wrist brace for a sprain that would ache for a month. Nobody could tell me much about the man who'd grabbed me, only that he'd worn a dark hood and gloves, and that whatever he'd been carrying in his jacket pocket, he'd kept it there. He had a knife, Wes told the responding officers, flat and precise. He had it out for maybe 2 seconds. He put it away the moment he heard the alarm. They found no weapon at the scene, no clean print, no clear look at a face. When they finally brought Derek Holt in for questioning 2 days later, he had 3 friends and a bar tab that put him 40 minutes across town at the time of the attack. Josie sat next to my hospital bed with her hand over her mouth for a long time before she could speak. "That was supposed to be me," she said, quiet and flat, like a fact she was trying to make true through repetition. "That coat was supposed to be on me. I keep thinking if I'd just gone to work like normal, none of this." "Stop," I said, and took her hand, the one without the IV in it. "You don't get to carry this too. There's only room for one of us to be hurt tonight, and I already called it." She laughed, wet and startled, the kind of laugh that arrives uninvited in the middle of crying, and for a second she looked 11 years old again, sitting on the bathroom floor the week after the funeral, waiting for me to tell her it would be okay, even though I had no idea if that was true. I told her it wasn't her fault, which was true, and that I was fine, which wasn't, not entirely, not yet. What I didn't tell her was that in the one clear second before he ran, I'd felt him realize his mistake. I'd felt it change something in him. Not relief, rage. Officer Boyd came by on the third day not to apologize, but to inform us that without a positive identification, an alibi like Holt's was hard to break. He suggested, in the same flat tone he might use to recommend a vitamin, that we consider a restraining order. Wes answered their questions carefully, vaguely, the way a man answers when he's already decided how much of the truth he's willing to spend. I noticed. I filed it away with everything else I didn't understand about him yet. 2 days after I came home, a note arrived at the diner, not under a windshield wiper this time, left with the hostess addressed for the first time, to me, by name. It didn't threaten me, that was the worst part. It thanked me. It said I'd shown him exactly how much Josie had to lose. Everything fell apart in the space of 9 days. First, a letter arrived for Wes from a lawyer, threatening a restraining order against him for harassment and unlawful surveillance, citing 3 sightings of him near Holt's place of work. Wes told me, jaw tight, that he'd been careful, that there was no reason Holt should have made him that fast, unless someone had tipped him off. He went quiet after that in a way I hadn't seen before, canceling 2 of our conversations, not at answering his door. When he finally did answer, 3 days later he wouldn't let me pass the doorway. "I can't be seen talking to you right now," he said. "Not until this clears. If his lawyer paints this as harassment and I'm still visibly involved, it makes both our positions worse." "So what, we just wait," I said, "while he sends me thank you notes for showing him what Josie has to lose." "We wait smart," he said. "That's different from waiting scared. I know the difference, I've paid for not knowing it before." I didn't understand yet what that last sentence meant. I only knew that he closed the door gently, not like he was shutting me out, more like he was trying to protect something we both still needed later. Then Boyd called to say that without new physical evidence, the department didn't have grounds to pursue Holt further, and that continuing to name him publicly might expose us to a countersuit. He said it like he was doing us a favor. Josie stopped sleeping again. She started talking about giving her notice at the diner, about moving in with a cousin 2 states away, about disappearing from her own life just to make herself impossible to find. I found her one night with a half-packed box of kitchen things on her table, staring at it like she wasn't sure how it had gotten there. "I'm not running away," she said before I could ask. "I'm being smart. There's a difference." I don't think either of us believed that, but I didn't argue, because I understood with a kind of sick clarity that disappearing was exactly what he wanted. Not just her fear, her absence, a clean, quiet victory nobody would ever have to answer for. I sat down across from her and put my hand on top of the box, like I could hold it shut through sheer will. "If you leave, he wins either way," I said. "If you stay and we do nothing, he wins too. I need you to give me 1 more week before you give up on this town." "1 more week to do what, exactly?" she said, and there wasn't any anger in it, just exhaustion so complete it had worn the anger smooth. "Ren, you got hurt because of me. I can't keep watching that happen and calling it strategy." I didn't have an answer for her that night. I just sat with her at the table until the box stopped looking like a decision and started looking like what it was, a box, and eventually she put the kettle on instead. We didn't talk about leaving again that week. But I noticed she didn't unpack it either. I want you to understand what those 9 days felt like, because I don't think I can explain it any other way. I stopped parking in open lots. I flinched at car doors closing behind me on the street. Twice, I sat in my own car outside my apartment for 10 full minutes before I could make myself walk to the door, hands shaking too hard to hold my keys steady, chest locked so tight I had to count my own breaths out loud like a child. I told myself I was being stronger than this. I wasn't. Some nights I sat on my bathroom floor, because of the only room without a window, and let myself think, just for a minute, that wearing that coat had been the worst decision of my life. That I'd made things worse instead of better. That I should have let her carry this alone, the way she'd always tried to. On the 9th night, I stood outside Wes' door at 11 o'clock, not entirely sure what I meant to say to him, my hand raised to knock. The door opened before I touched it. He already knew I was there. "Her name was Callie Nash," he said before I'd even stepped inside. He turned the corkboard around so I could finally see it properly. A young woman, maybe 24 in the photograph, laughing at something out of frame. A case number. Newspaper clippings from another state, another year. 3 years ago, he told me, he'd been hired by Callie's parents after the local police in her town ran out of road the same way Boyd had just run out of road with us. Same pattern. Gifts. Notes that knew too much. A man who'd used a different first name back then, but the same face, the same handwriting, the same particular cruelty of thanking a victim for showing him exactly what she had to lose. Wes had built almost the whole case privately off the books, right up until Holt's lawyer accused him of harassment and stalking, and the investigation collapsed under its own weight before it ever reached a courtroom. Callie stopped returning his calls not long after. He still didn't know even now if that meant she'd gotten safe or just gone quiet the way frightened people go quiet. "Why does this one still matter so much to you?" I asked. "It's been 3 years. You could have taken 100 easier cases since then." He was quiet long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer. "Because I told her parents I'd get him," he said finally. "Because I was so sure of myself back then that I went public before the case could survive it, and it fell apart in front of them, and I had to watch that happen. I don't move fast anymore. I don't announce anything until I'm certain. That's not caution, that's a promise I haven't kept yet." I understood in that moment that his carefulness wasn't coldness at all. It was the shape guilt takes when you've decided never to make the same mistake twice. "I tracked him to Millbrook 8 months ago," Wes said. "I moved into this building the same week he started parking out Josie's apartment, close enough to watch, careful enough not to be seen watching, because the last time I went loud, it cost a woman her case, and possibly a great deal more. I'm telling you this now," he said, "because I think it's the only way this ends differently than it did for her." 4 months of training, I said slowly. 6 months of him watching her. 3 years since Callie. We've all just been circling this same man in the dark. Wes watched me carefully. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking he's arrogant enough to come back out into the open if he believes no one's watching anymore," I said. "I'm thinking I'm done being careful in a way that only makes me easier to frighten." It wasn't a plan yet. It was closer to a decision, quiet and plain, the kind you make once and don't take back. "Let him come," I said. "This time, let's actually be ready." It took 2 weeks to build something that would hold up in a courtroom instead of collapsing the way Wes's private case had 3 years earlier. This time he didn't work alone. He went to Boyd directly, not with suspicion, but with Callie Nash's file laid flat on the desk between them, 3 years of dates that lined up with Derek Holt's own employment records in 2 different states. Whatever Boyd felt reading it, shame or something close to it, he didn't waste time on it. He brought in a detective from the department's specialized unit, a woman named Reyes, who read the whole file twice and said quietly that this was the first time in 3 years anyone had shown her a pattern instead of a single incident. I went back to my old schedule. Same shifts, same walk to the same lot, same coat, mended now at the shoulder seam by Josie's own hands, 3 neat stitches she wouldn't let me pay her back for. I wore a wire I could barely feel under my collar. Reyes and Wes watched from an unmarked car 40 yards out, close enough to move, far enough not to spook him. For 12 nights, nothing happened. I told myself that was fine. I told myself patience was its own kind of training. On the 9th night, a car slowed behind me in the lot, and my whole body went cold before I recognized a neighbor from Unit 6 pulling in after a late shift of his own. Rice's voice came through the earpiece, low and steady. "Stand down. That's not him. Keep walking." I kept walking. My hands didn't stop shaking for another 10 minutes. I understood that night why Wes had spent 3 years being careful instead of fast. Waiting for a man like this to make a mistake wasn't a strategy you could rush. It was a discipline you had to survive, one ordinary, terrifying night at a time. On the 13th night it wasn't fine anymore, it was over. He came out of the dark the same way he had the first time, except this time I heard him and didn't turn around, didn't run. Let him get close enough to talk, because talking was the only thing that would put his own voice on a recording instead of just his hands on my body. "I knew you'd come back to this schedule eventually," he said. "People always go back to what's comfortable. I was going to take care of both of you, you know. That's more than anyone else in your life ever offered." "Both of us," I repeated, "like Callie." Something in his face changed, a door slamming shut behind his eyes. He hadn't expected that name. He asked how I knew it, and in his surprise he said enough. Her full name, the town. a detail about the last time he'd seen her that only the man who'd stood outside her window for months could possibly have known. That was the moment the headlights came on. He ran 3 steps before Reyes and 2 officers had him on the ground. They found a folding knife in his jacket pocket, a spare key on his ring that opened a door that wasn't his, and a notebook in his car with 1.5 years of Josie's schedule written in small, careful handwriting and 4 pages near the back about a woman named Callie. It made the local news 2 days later. Regular customer at Ruth's Diner charged with stalking, assault, and breaking and entering, the anchor said. One of the other regulars, a woman who'd sat 2 stools down from him 100 times, told a reporter on camera that she just couldn't believe it. He always tipped so well. Callie Nash saw the story on a friend's phone 3 states away and called Detective Reyes herself the next morning. Her original account, corroborated now by a second victim and 3 years of Wes file, added charges the department hadn't even known to look for. Derek Holt was denied bail. Whatever mask had bought him free coffee refills and 30% tips and 6 months of a police department's benefit of the doubt did not survive its first week of coverage. Josie and I watched the arrest footage together on my couch that night, replaying it more times than either of us probably should have. She didn't say much. She just reached over at one point and took my hand, the same way I'd taken hers in the hospital, and held on until the segment ended. "He used to ask if I wanted extra whipped cream," she said finally. "On the house. Every single time." There wasn't anything funny about it, but we both laughed anyway, the kind of laugh that comes out sideways when you don't know what else to do with everything you're feeling at once. 3 months after the trial started, it was over. Josie walked to her car alone on a Tuesday night in November, for the first time in over a year, and texted me one word when she got there safely: home. I sat on my couch and cried harder over that single word than I had over almost anything else that year. We started leaving the diner's back door unlocked during close again, the way Ruth always used to insist on before any of this started. Small thing, it felt enormous. Even Boyd changed, a little. He stopped by the diner once, out of uniform, and left an unusually large tip and an apology that came out clumsy and unrehearsed, like he'd practiced it and still couldn't get it right. I don't think he'll ever be the officer who believes a woman the first time she asks for help, but I think now he might be the officer who remembers what it cost the last time he didn't. The coat still hangs by my door. Josie wears it more than I do now, which feels right, somehow, like we finally got to decide what it means instead of letting someone else decide for us. Marcus texted her twice in the weeks after the arrest, first to apologize for going quiet, then to ask carefully if she'd want to try again from the beginning. She hasn't decided yet. I think that's allowed too, wanting to take your time deciding what you're ready to let back into your life. Wes never made some big declaration out of any of it. That wasn't him. A week after the arraignment, I came into work to find the diner's back door lock replaced, quietly. No note, no mention, just fixed the way it had been broken and unsafe for longer than any of us wanted to admit. He was in the corner booth that night when I got off shift, a paperback open in front of him he wasn't really reading, in no particular hurry to leave before I did. I don't flinch at parking lots anymore. Not every time anyway. Some nights I even forget to check the clock before I walk out the back door, and when I remember that I forgot, I let myself feel something other than fear about it. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if you think the ending was earned. Comment harder if you wanted him to face something even worse. Your comments decide how far the next story goes. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for it.